Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're doing another book review. Today we're looking at Uncrowned, Cradle number 7 by Will White, published by Hidden Gnome Publishing, which is a self-published group, I guess. Basically, it's just Will White's, company that he publishes through on Amazon, right? The demographic for this book is adult, I guess. I mean, I always think of Cradle as a YA series. And you can agree or disagree with me, but the main character does start as a YA character, right? He's like a 15-year-old, and I guess at this point he's around 20, but a lot of the issues that he still faces are still pretty, generic YA, 20-year-old kind of problems that most YA books would kind of deal with, right? But I don't think I know a single person that is actually a young adult that has read this or would read this, just because it's kind of out of the wheelhouse of like marketing for them, right? So I guess I would consider this an adult book because that's who I see actually reading this, right? Genre-wise, this is a cultivation novel. It's a progression fantasy. It's also Asian-inspired fantasy, if you want to call it that. I've never considered it that particularly because that's kind of implied. But if you like shonen, anime and manga, you'll like this. So there you go. Adaptations wise, it does not have one for this book. However, book 1 is animated or is in the process of being animated through a Kickstarter that Will White did with some, very famous animators. And there was a lot of talk about it during, I guess it was San Diego Comic-Con, I think. Maybe it was New York. I think it was San Diego. And it is coming at some point, probably by the end of the year, but maybe into early next year. And it does cover book 1. So there is an adaptation of sorts for this series. It's just not including this book, right? And the rating for this book was a 5 out of 5 for me. I thought it was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it. Premise-wise, basically the start of the Uncrowned tournament. It's kind of really dealing with all of the important stuff that's happening here. We finally get the tournament arc that you would get in most manga, and this is very similar to Naruto's what's it called, the tuning exams, right? Or the sports festival from My Hero Academia, right? I guess technically it's also supposed to be like the Budokai Tenkaichi, right? Like from Dragon Ball, but it's not exactly like that in my opinion. It honestly feels more like a tuning exam kind of vibe to me. But there are like political implications through this. So I guess it's also kind of like the early version of the modern Olympic Games, right? There was like a political undertone to them, right? So that's basically it. And we get to see everyone arrive to the country where it's being set. And then we start having some battles, right? So overall, very fun stuff. I'm very happy about it. So let's just jump into the plot line here. In terms of the prologue, because I'm going to split it up by different story elements, right? So in terms of prologue, we open up with Orthos, who at the end of the last book met Kelsa, Lyndon's sister. I think she's supposed to be his older sister, but I always imagined her as his younger sister, right? Although I think she is older than him. And they're walking to this slum kind of area, this refugee camp, essentially. And Kelsa and her dad turn out to be exiles. They basically had to deal with the repercussions of everything that Lyndon did when he was escaping the Sacred Valley. And so now they are outcasts in society. They're exiles. And they are in a very bad situation. Jaron, Kelsa's dad, is blinded. Orthos walks up to their home. And then it turns out that the Heaven's Glory school showed up. She tells him, what happened. They stole Lyndon's family. So they stole his mom, and they turned her into basically a worker slave for them to some extent. And Kelsa and Jaron escaped, but like kind of barely. They couldn't find her mom in time, so they had to leave her behind. And so Kelsa and Jaron have just been trying to eke out a living in this slum. And trying to, continue to get stronger so that eventually Kelsa can go find her mother. And so Orthos is going to basically take in Kelsa and train her up, and hopefully they'll be able to do something about that, right? So overall, very cool stuff. I really enjoyed this. I think it's awesome to see Orthos again. It's been a while at this point. And also, I think it's really interesting to go back to Secret Valley, kind of finally start setting up the fact that Lyndon will return there at some point, right? And it was very exciting when I first read this. At this point, I've read this book about twice, maybe three times if you really want to kind of consider skimming through it to make sure I wrote all of the important bits reading. But yeah, it's been very enjoyable. The Abaddon story starts here after the prologue. Basically, Machiel is focusing on this criminal when he notices that a world has suddenly gone missing. And it turns out that this criminal is called Eerie, or her epithet is actually the Angler. And she's been, waiting up in this little kind of place for 9 months. And she's been doing this because she wants to get into the Abaddon vault. And when she, her time is up, she manages to sneak in there and steals Machiel's Reaper sights. Because, so Osriel is the Reaper. He is like a different kind of Abaddon character, right? So there used to be, I guess it was like 7, and then he shows up and he becomes the 8th one or something like that. I can't remember the numbering system, but there used to be a set number of them, and then Osriel shows up and then he becomes the Reaper. And so he is the only person that can properly cut away parts of the universe in order to save others, right? And so that's why he becomes important. And he does this through this special magical weapon that he has, which is his scythe. And Machiel, in his kind of weird ploy for always having control of everything, because that's kind of his whole dominion, right? Made a bunch of copies of it, but he could never make it as good as Osriel could. And so Eerie is here to try to steal those so that she can try to build something similar to Osriel's scythe, right? And it's very cool. I really enjoyed this. It's a bit out of, kind of out of turn, I guess is the phrase I want to say. It's kind of odd. It doesn't really fit into the other things because this feels like a cop procedural that doesn't really fit into this like fantasy, shonen manga kind of story. But it manages to be very interesting. I really enjoy this. I think Eerie the Angler is a very funny character. I think she's interesting. And we finally start the main story at this point. So Lyndon is at the Akura City. I can't remember what it's called. And he is being processed by Justice. He passes all of the tests with flying colors. Actually, he impresses Justice a bit too much, to be honest. He's like, oh shit, this guy's kind of like very good. Are you sure that this is, do we want him here? Basically, he's surprised by how good this guy is. He kind of gets put into the Akura City. Back home, we get to see Yeren and Ethan are sparring, and Yeren is mad at Ethan because he isn't taking things seriously. And so he decides to take her seriously for once, and when he does, it's insane. He is like billion times better than her. It's like a ridiculous like situation where she finds herself immensely outclassed, like to an extent that is basically useless for her to train against, right? Like she will win nothing, or she will earn or learn nothing from being treated seriously by Ethan. She needs him to step down a little bit so that she can try to fight on his level. It's kind of humbling for Yeren, but also kind of shows us that there's something more to Ethan than you would expect. And I find it to be really, really enjoyable. I like that a lot. We're finally at Moongrave, which is the city, the Akura City. And Lyndon is introduced to the other Akura underlords. And they all hate him because he basically stole their spot for them with like no chance for them to compete against him. And the Akura family is an insane, very hierarchical and very political family. And so they see him as an outsider that suddenly managed to usurp them and usurp their chance. And so they all hate him, right? And they all want to beat him up. And so we get introduced to Pride, who's Mercy's little brother, and he's very pissed at the Lyndon, at the existence of Lyndon. And it's pretty funny. At this point, Lyndon is like, oh, okay, well, this is my chance to see if they can send me back so I can go be with Yeren instead. And it doesn't really work because, what's it called? Melody, right? And Malice want him to pay for what he did by killing what's his name, the guy from the previous book. I can't remember his name. And the only way to do that is by him becoming better than the other Akura that he killed, and making sure that he works for the Akura family. And so he is not allowed to leave. He's given a house and some servants, and we basically have a giant training montage here that's pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. Given that he has, the job of making sure that the Akira family does not lose. He is given everything he needs to train. He is given tablets for martial arts because although Lyndon is a very good channeler or whatever you want to call it, he's very good at controlling his madra, and he has really overpowered abilities. He doesn't have the basics necessary to fight well. And so he learns how to do martial arts at this point, which is something that he had not been able to do before. And I find this kind of weird. I mean, I don't think that makes sense. I feel like even if he was unsold in the Sacred Valley, he would have had to learn, right? But then I thought about it some more, and I guess it makes sense that because he can't use mana or madra or whatever it's called in this book, he would not be allowed to join any of the training because he'd be a liability, right? Like no one would be able to train against him because he's just infinitely weaker than them. And so maybe that's why he was not allowed at all. But I feel like Kelsa should have taught him some stuff, even if she wasn't able to really train with him, right? But it is what it is. It's not really important. It's just like at this point, Lyndon has managed to get by the skin of his teeth, right? And now he has to actually learn how to fight properly. And we finally get him to do that. So that's pretty cool. He gives a lot of skills to Dross. He is told why being at Moongrave is important. And it's basically that Lyndon killed a person that was very important to the Akira family. And now he has to take their place. And it's not just that. That is like the motivation to why the Akiras have taken Lyndon. But Lyndon's motivation should be that he has to win the tournament because otherwise the Akiras are seen as weak. And if they're seen as weak, the dragons and the lion people, I can't remember the name of that group, are going to attack this region of the continent. And if they do that, the Akira family will not be powerful enough to stop both of those other groups of people from destroying everything, right? And the Sacred Valley is going to be the last place that they go to, but it's going to be the easiest for them to destroy because no one at the Sacred Valley is powerful enough to stop anyone, right? And so Lyndon finally takes it kind of seriously. He's like, okay, well, shit, I guess I gotta do this, right? It's a political and physical might kind of competition to show that the dragons will not be able to take this land. Because they are encroaching very seriously on it and they want it, right? For whatever reason. I think they just hate Malice. And so we get to see that Lyndon is going through constant duels. He's getting a lot of mental maps for draws. He's learning a lot about his opponents. But he is not really able to consistently beat most of them. Or he's able to beat most of them, but not the strongest ones. And so he has to continue to work against them. And he runs himself ragged training. Eventually, one of the Akira people, I can't remember her name, Melody, I think. Is that her name? Let me double check here. Yeah, I guess it is Akira Melody. If that's wrong, I'm sorry. Someone let me know that in the comments. But so she gives him a tablet that allows him to connect with Yeren and interact with her like voice, right? It's basically a phone. And so Lyndon now has like a way for him to take a break by spending time talking with Yeren because he hasn't had a break at all in the weeks that he's been at the Akira family home, right? And so he finally gets to have a little bit of peace. Then we get introduced to Akira Fury, who is the first son of Akira Malice. He's Mercy's older brother, although she calls him uncle because of the way that their timeline just kind of works out for them. And he is basically the second highest level person in the Akira family. And he's a battle-crazed kind of guy. He reminds me a little bit of like Jiraiya, I guess, but he's not pervy. He's just like very battle-hungry, kind of like Goku, right? And he manages to help Lyndon modify his empty palm. And so now it's not just a single direct strike. It's also like a what's it called? Is it double palm? It's like an attack that Hariyama, the Pokemon, has, right? Where he like hits you once and he hits you again. It's kind of the same idea. It's a double strike, right? And it's pretty cool. I really, really like this. And I really enjoy the introduction of Akira Fury. He's very funny. I really enjoy this character. So at this point, we transition over to the Abaddon again. So we get to see this other report. And through it, we learn the origin story of Seseth Kunaz, which is the human child that is in charge of the dragons. And apparently, it's actually because he is a dragon raised by humans, and so he loves humans to an extent. He idolizes their form, and he has advanced so much that he was able to change his form, and he changed it into the form of a young child to kind of show respect for his human brother that died or that was killed or something. I can't remember exactly, but this Abaddon report is really interesting. And they do this over a few different times throughout this book to really understand all of the different characters that are like high level, right? Like all of the people that are at the level of Malice, right? And of Northstrider. So very cool stuff. I really enjoyed it. I didn't write too many notes about it because it would just be too much, but very cool. I really recommend that you guys pay attention to this stuff. It's very enjoyable. We come back to the main story here. We get to see that Yeren and Saeya, which is the younger sister of the Emperor of the Black Flame Empire, can't spar very well because their styles are too different. Yeren is a kind of ground-based close attacker, and Saeya is all about being up in the sky. And so Yeren can't attack her, right? Because she can't hit her up in the sky. And Saeya can't attack Yeren because Yeren can just overpower all of her attacks. And so their training system is not working for them, right? So Ethan at this point steps in and he's like, you know what you need? You need sensory training. So he blindfolds Yeren, and he teaches her how to use her all her other senses to predict attacks, to concentrate more and stop using her eyes, because that should help her gain more abilities and become a better fighter, and hopefully that will make it so that it's easier for her to fight characters like Saeya, right? I'm not really sure how. I can't remember exactly the reasonings, but it's something like that, right? And at this point, we mentioned the Frozen Blade Sage, which is another sword sage that Yeren knows in passing, right? Then we transition over to Moongrave, where we get to see that the Akuras are having a choosing ceremony. They're trying to decide who is going to go to the Uncrowned tournament. Linden decides that it's finally time to show off, and he tells Akira Fury and Melody, he's like, hey, I'm going to fight everyone here, and I'm going to beat all of them, except maybe one or two of them, and I'm going to show them that I'm better than them. And so he does, and he beats the shit out of like 15 different characters, and the only ones that are left here are Pride and Grace. And then we get introduced to Grace, who is another female character. She is a Akura of like a second or third level family, but she is one of the Akuras that most looks like Malice, and she's someone that's supposed to be very powerful and very important in the clan just because she is that good. And Linden fights her, and he manages to sort of win, or like I think he does win, but barely. And then he's not allowed to fight Pride. And so we finally finish up the choosing ceremony, and the team is going to be Linden, Pride, and Mercy as one team. Grace is going to be the head of a different team, and they're going to have some other characters to fill in that as well. Finally, we get to see Linden have some off time as well. He and Mercy go to see a play. It reminds me of the scene in Star Wars where Anakin and Palpatine are watching this weird, like, orgasm orchestra in the sky. And they're basically talking about romance. So, Mercy is trying to get Linden to go out with Yeren. And Linden is trying to just like keep training while he's hanging out with her. And it's pretty funny. I enjoyed this. I think it's nice that the romance between Yeren and Linden is finally moving forward, right? I mean, there was always like an interest, right? Because, they're the first male and female character that are not related that's shown into our story. So they're obviously going to be the main couple of the story, but it's been taking a long time for them to get there. And it's finally nice to see them, ramp that up, right? I'm very excited to see what happens here later. I mean, I know what happens, but for the sake of the video, right? Like, it's very exciting to see this finally happen, right? And it's finally time to leave for the tournament. So they head off to the Nine Cloud Court, which is the other kingdom that they're going to. And Yeren and company also leave. But they get attacked by Sephora. Sephora being the giant dragon lady that they met when they were at, what's it called? Deepwater, whatever the place, the Northstrider place where Linden got Dross. And they're slowed down. And they basically potentially don't make it, right? Linden and the Akuras arrive really quickly. They ask about the Black Flames, and it seems that they haven't been able to arrive yet. But the opening ceremony is about to start soon, and eventually the Winter Sage manages to bring Yeren and company in just at the nick of time before they were introduced, or right at the end of being introduced, so that they finally show up, right? And we get to see that the Winter Sage was going to marry the Sword Sage, and for whatever reason it didn't work out. But she thinks that Yeren is like her daughter, and Yeren is like, dude, get the fuck away from me. I don't like you. And it's pretty funny. I actually really enjoy this interaction because it's like a stepmom that's really into the daughter of the guy that she couldn't marry, or like the guy that she married, right? And Yeren, being like a moody teenage girl, is like, no, I'm good, right? But Yeren is like a 22-year-old at this point. So I thought it was pretty funny. And it seems like the dragons are doing everything possible to screw up the Akuras. And they've been doing this for quite a while. This is basically their MO for this tournament. So right before the tournament starts, we get to have another Abadan report. At this point, we get introduced to Shah Miara, who is one of the characters that Lyndon sees in his original vision back in Unsold. And it turns out that she is the latest version of the emperor of this kingdom, or of this court. But the way it works is that they have a special bloodline ability, or a special skill that allows them to transfer memories and abilities across time to the next person in the succession, right? And so this girl technically is like the highest level possible, but she caps herself at the level that like Lyndon and Yeren are at, in order to find something meaningful to do with her time, because it's basically like a giant cheat skill, right? She gets to advance to the top immediately, and so she's kind of bored with her life. So it's pretty interesting. And we return to the main story at this point. With the opening ceremony ends, lots of people and sects are introduced. We get to learn about a bunch of them, but they're not, that important overall. The most important thing that we see here is that Reagan Shin, the Lion Man, has gathered all of the Dread God sects under his banner, and so he's using them in the tournament. And that's kind of crazy, because the whole point of this tournament is to make sure that there's enough powerful fighters to fight against the Dread Gods if they ever awaken, right? And to show the political differences and political power of all of these countries, right? Through showing off their military, right? And Northstrider shows up and kind of at the end of the ceremony and and shows up and he's like, well, I'm here now. I was not dead. I will be in charge of this tournament. While I'm in charge, no one will die in the tournament, right? Which is pretty interesting. He kind of changes the balance of power at that point, but because he's of equal level to all the other really high level people, no one can naysay him, and so they just have to go with it. It's pretty cool. It makes the stakes change a little bit, because they can die in certain situations, but Northstrider will minimize that as much as possible, so that even though the political kind of situation happens and changes, the loss of life is going to be lower, and hopefully that'll keep all of the countries a bit more stable overall. And I think it's mostly just to counter the dragons, because Northstrider hates them for whatever reason. So pretty cool stuff. And we start the tournament, and the first round is basically a long set of tasks to give all of the characters initial rankings. It's kind of like when Deku and everyone has to run through the obstacle course to decide which of them are going to continue on to the fights, right? Same concept. And so Lyndon and everyone else has to defeat an army, open a box, kill an enemy to survive. Kill an enemy, then survive poison, then stay on a bridge, then kill an enemy, and it just kind of goes in cycles, right? And it's basically partially a stamina thing and partially a show-off thing, right? And Lyndon manages to get to 10th place. Yeren ends up at 11th. Mercy gets 8th. Ethan manages to only scrape by and gets 64. Place 64. And the first prize is a floating fortress, and everyone gets to have one. All of the 64 people in this that managed to pass. And Lyndon decides to join his with Yeren and have an extra large flying fortress. So they basically have like a sky city at this point. Well, not really. They have like a sky mansion. And they're allowed to do this by the organizers of the tournament. The second round starts, and this is basically a team-based King of the Hill. And there's 32 crowns. All of the teams enter, and each person needs to claim a crown. This is, again, similar to the My Hero Academia tournament arc when they get their licenses, where they have to like do certain things in order to in order to pass, right? Like, and they have a specific kind of task, right? Or maybe it's more similar to in the tuning exams where they have to do the heaven and earth scroll stuff. It kind of has that vibe where there is a specific task that they have to complete as teams in order to move on, right? And it's pretty cool. I really, really enjoyed this at this point. The Akura is trying to join forces, but everyone else is actually attacking them. I don't know why everyone else has decided that they're going to fuck the Akuras this time, and that's what they're doing. And most of them manage to pass either way. So Pride, Saeya, and Grace don't get to pass, and so they're out of the tournament, but everyone else does, and that's pretty cool. We get to see some awesome stuff for the prizes at this point. Each character that passed gets a weapon, an Archlord level weapon, and it's made specifically for them. Actually, is it? Maybe they just get to pick out of a vault of weapons. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure they get to pick out of a vault. I said that it was made specifically for them, but that's not true. The fortress is made to people's specifications. The weapon is chosen out of a vault. And then the third round starts, and we get to see a team deathmatch. So Linden and Yeren have to fight against the Black Dragon prisoner, who actually ends up being the last Black Flame user that was actually part of the Black Flame line from the Black Flame Empire. His name was Nyan Black Flame, and well, it's kind of crazy. Linden is not happy about having to fight this guy, but he gets to learn some stuff out of it from fighting with someone that is naturally a Black Flame user. And Linden gets to fight first. He heals Nyan's madness, he absorbs his mantra, and he manages to learn a new technique out of it. So that's really, really awesome. Mercy manages to force a surrender, and then Sephora kills him. Because he lost. And Linden is very unhappy about that. But before he dies, Nyan says to Linden, the dragon advances. And so Linden understands that this guy is putting his hopes and dreams and the reality of his clan or whatever onto Linden. And he understands that this guy knows that he was going to die anyways. And so I said Yeren earlier, but actually it was Linden and Mercy have to fight against Sephora and the Black Flame prisoner. We get another Abaddon report at this point. We get to see Reagan Shen's origins. He was the winner of the first Uncrowned tournament, and he was a lion that was a beast that eventually gained so much power and strength that he became human. Again, kind of like the dragon character. And he's someone that's obsessed with hoarding things and with gaining abilities and power and strength through using other people. He's a very kind of conniving character. I bet he's based on Scar from The Lion King, but I'm not exactly sure if that's the case, right? We return to the main story at this point, and we get to see that Ethan has to fight against another Aurelius character, and it's a very, very, very weird fight because they're both precognitive, right? Because this other person is also of the main Aurelius family, and so they're like fighting, but it doesn't look right because they're fighting like 3 moves ahead of each other. And so the way that they're fighting to us looks really odd, right? And it's a really weird fight, but throughout it, Yeren manages to unlock something while watching, and Ethan manages to win. And so Yeren has to fight against Altavian, who's another Aurelius character, and she fights him blindfolded. And it's a slow start. She initially isn't really able to do much about this, but she gets in a flow state, and then she wins. And it turns out that she was fighting like a mirror of the sword state. She was tapping into his power in some way. And it's kind of unclear what it is at this point, but basically she's tapping into this icon or this like higher level power through this training. And, for her, it seems accidental, but of course, Ethan was behind it all the whole time. Round 4 starts at this point, and it's an elimination. They have to get 8 out of 16 players, and they become the Uncrowned. And the fights are Zeal versus a Stormcaller, Zeal being the Loki guy from Ghostwater. And then Shamira fights the Red Moon Hall, and I think she wins. And, you have a bunch of fights at this point. The final fights are Yeren versus Mercy and Linden versus Sephora. And it's kind of crazy that this is going to happen this way because you're forcing the Black Flame Empire to lose, the Akuras to lose fighters. But I think Norse Strider is actually the one that decided these fights. So I don't know what he's trying to play with. We come back to the Abaddon story at this point. We get to see that Eerie meets with the Mad King, who's this other big, massive, badass Abaddon level character that is the Vroshir. He's like the leader of them. And they're at this stronghold, and there's this trade. Eerie gets a world seed, and she gives him this perfected scythe that she made out of the one she stole from Machiel. We return to the main story at this point, and it turns out that the prizes for round 3 are gifts from the Monarch. So each Monarch gives something different to each of the characters. Ethan asks Varys to give stuff to Lyndon and Yaren instead of himself. And Mercy gets an archery tablet. Zeal gets a bunch of healing pills from this special like tree lady. And it doesn't really work, but it's closer and closer to fixing him. Yaren gets the Diamond Veins elixir from the Aurelia family, and this means that she gets these very awesome Madra paths across her body, so she can channel even more Madra to them, and this is really helpful for her based on the way that her body works, right? Her path works, actually. And Lyndon gets the Metal Heart, which makes his healing even faster than it already is, thanks to his empty palm, I think. To his iron body, right? So it helps him a lot. So Flora gets an elixir to become Overlord, and she chooses to use it because apparently you have to be Underlord to get into it, but if you advance during it, that's not a big deal. And the thing is that there's some problems with this because she's been using steroids basically to augment her powers, and so her body isn't actually ready, even though her spirit might technically be, and so this causes some issues for her. Lyndon and Yaren test their new iron body, or test his new iron body. It's very nice. And then Yaren talks about knowing each other through battle. She wants to battle him all out properly. And this kind of foreshadows the fact that they're going to have to fight later. And she talks about her master's ultimate technique. And Ethan gets Northstrider interested in Lyndon by just, being annoying, because that's how it works. And then the big plot twist happens, which is that Yaren is going to have to fight Lyndon. And their fight is really awesome. Lyndon feels kind of lame at this point because he loses. He doesn't want to fight initially. And then he finally gains resolve to do this. Then he manages to use this new technique he learned, which is called the Dragon Descends. And then they have this awesome fight together. Yaren manages to win, and we finally get introduced to a sword icon because this is what she uses to win. And she manages to beat Lyndon kind of barely. And the Winter Sage wants to tutor Yaren because that's one of the prizes for this round. So Northstrider learns about Dross at this point, and this is kind of concerning, but then we don't get to see what happens there because we get the Abaddon report, and we get to see Northstrider's origin story. And at this point, I just think he's like Kaido, like from One Piece. He is this person that decided to, he's a person. He was this kind of slave kid in this region. He was raised as a soldier, and eventually he started to consume dragons and gained power through that. And so he has a special kind of path that has to do with blood and with water and something else, right? The dragon stuff ties into it. I can't remember how. And he basically just grows stronger and stronger and stronger. And he is like this unkillable, angry, like sad person, right? He's kind of like Kaido. And he has the dragon vibes because he, like every time that he would level up, the gold sign would be based on the dragons that he was consuming, right? So pretty cool stuff there. I actually really enjoyed this. I thought that was probably the coolest Abaddon report that we got for these characters. We return to the main story. Lyndon is happy for Yaren, but he's still moping about his loss regardless, right? We jump back into the Abaddon story at this point. We get to see that Machiel has seen Lost Worlds. He runs calculations and sees fate. And he says that he has to withdraw to survive. If they want to make sure that the Abaddon and, reality and order prevail, they have to lose 800 worlds to save 200. And so he pushes them back. They withdraw all of their fighters to the main core worlds, and he starts to recruit. He sends signals to the hounds to descend on all the worlds and to try to recruit strong people so they can fight against Avroshir properly. And this is actually what causes some of the issues that happen here at the end. So we come back to the main story. We see kind of the sky, and suddenly it says prepare for spatial transfer. And the characters get sent to the tournament area, and then suddenly a hound descends. And his name is Kiuran, Kiuran. And he's kind of a rat man. He reminds me of Nezumi from One Piece. And he's kind of a shitty person. And he says that the tournament will continue as is planned, but he will give them penance, which is this special insta-kill arrow, as a reward to whoever wins. And this means that he was particularly changing the way in which the world works, the political sphere works at this point. And he's doing this in order to pressure all of the leaders, all of the monarchs, to ascend when it comes time, right? And so he also kind of gives some words to the uncrowned characters, the children, as he calls them. And so Kainur leaves, and Linden is grabbed by North Strider. And that's the end of the book. It kind of ends in a weird way, but I really enjoyed it. I thought the ending was really awesome the first time I read it. Although I was frustrated a little bit. It was very cool. It was a very nice cliffhanger. And overall, this book was great. I really enjoyed the battle scenes. I think it's very interesting to have such a structured battle sequence after the first 6 books are basically just kind of like, oh fuck, they gotta fight, and Linden has to figure out how to win, right? Linden has to figure out how to win on the fly as well in this story, but there's more planning to it, and there's more structure, and that makes the fighting different from usual, and I thought that was really enjoyable. So overall, the plotline was awesome. I really, really had a good time with it. So in terms of characters, we get Linden and Yeren having their romance kind of start finally. We get to see that they have a lot of upgrades and techniques given to them, right? Mostly their upgrades are about accessing their powers better, and their techniques are mostly about Linden learning more about how to use his powers, how to modify his twin star path, right? Because he hasn't really done much with it yet. And for Yeren, it's mostly about tapping into the sword icon and becoming a sage character, or slowly developing the ability to become a sage character, which is awesome. We get introduced to all of the monarchs that are important in this region of the world, although I guess they might be the only monarchs in the world. I think there might be 1 or 2 that are not related to anything that's happening, but it is supposed to be a tournament from across the world, right? So we get introduced to Emrys Silentborn, who was a tree that became a woman. We get introduced to Tiberian Aurelius, although he's dead. And that's why Athen is actually at the Black Flame Empire, not back home. We get to meet Regan Shen, who is the lion that turned into a man. Shamiara, who is like a puppet of like the original version of herself, whatever that was, like back in the day. The 8-man empire, which is actually not a monarch at all. It's actually 8 people that are like sages and heralds. And so together they become the force of a monarch, but they're not actually a monarch. And the way that they did this is kind of weird. It's very interesting, but I don't think it gets explained in this book. So yeah, we get introduced to Iri and the Mad King and Kiuran. And in terms of the Akuras, we get to see Pride, Grace, and Fury. Fury being the funnest character out of all of them. I think he's really fun. World building wise, we get to see that the Vroshir also have leaders, and they have a similar hierarchical structure to the Abaddon, but it's kind of different because they're kind of like chaos people, right? Like they're I guess you could call them pirates or something. I'm not really sure what to call them, but they want to destroy order, right? Whereas the Abaddon want to continuously create more of it. We get introduced to the Uncrowned tournament and what it's about. It's basically just about settling political and well, mostly just political fights between the different monarchs in a way that is satisfying and also forces all of them to contribute in some way. And we get to learn more about the continents. I can't remember the names of them, but there's like 5 continents. We get to learn that the Abaddon, regularly recruit people, and they prefer to recruit monarchs and heralds and sages. But most of the time, at least on CRADLE, a lot of people tend to, like, CRADLE is the place where most people, or the most meaningful members of the Abaddon have come from, but most of the current generation is not interested in becoming an Abaddon in ascending, and so they're kind of concerned that that's a problem, right? And we learn about the origins of all of the monarchs, which is pretty cool. And we learn about icons, but it's very unclear what they are so far. Mostly I understand it to be like fundamental truths of the universe expressed in some way, and different characters can tap into them, and that makes them sages, right? In terms of artwork and fan service, there was no artwork in this book at the time of purchase and at the time of reading it, but I'm pretty sure that at some point in the near future, it's going to get updated, and then there will be some images to follow along with it, and they might already be there because those images are supposed to be from the leather bound editions, right? And they just get added into the normal books at a later date, right? So I'm sure that at this point the book has some art in it, but I can't remember if that's true or not. And ratings wise is a 5 out of 5. It was super duper fun. So yeah, overall, really enjoyed it. There's really no complaints I have here. Overall, this was awesome. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.